Hello and welcome to Dream Talks. I am super excited to bring a good friend of mine to the show today. This man is incredible. He understands transformation. He knows how to see personal transformation in your own life. In fact, he runs an organization called Transform You, which is amazing. This guy, he's just done incredible things. He started out very early in his life. He had a bout with homelessness for a minute. And now he's an 8-figure entrepreneur. He owns, I think it's 6 companies now. He has 400 plus people working for him. And in his spare time, he writes best-selling books, and he does 3-day live events teaching people how to transform their lives, get their mind right, create the transformation that they want to see. And man, this guy is just a champion. I've had the privilege of interacting with him, of visiting him, getting to know him and his family, multiple dinners together. We've met in different parts of America at different times. And just one of those guys, I'm just incredible. I'm incredibly blessed to call my friend and to have in my life. So let me introduce you to Steven Scoggins.
What is up, brother? How you doing, man?
Hey, man. How are you?
Anytime I get to hang out with you, I'm doing awesome.
You always have such positive energy. Like, we have such a blast every time we talk. You know?
Yeah, man. Well, there's no other way to live, right? You can either live in the past, you can live in the future. I choose to live in the future.
Oh, shoot. You're going to preach. Here we go. Here we go. Buckle in, people. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, man, your story is just so inspiring. It's so amazing. There's so much of God mixed in with every part, from where you started to where you are, to bumps in the road along the way. And just the journey has been just amazing. So tell me about just the early years.
Gosh, there's so much there. We could take an entire show or two just to kind of break out the backstory. But in short, I would say it this way. I grew up in a broken home. So mother and father dealing with their own, as we would say in the Christian community, demons, right? And, we now know that it wasn't necessarily demonic. It was just, they had their own issues they got to face, right? But my father struggled with alcoholism quite a bit. A trade he picked up from my grandfather, unfortunately, who survived Pearl Harbor, who got into alcohol because of what we now know as PTSD, of course. So it kind of gives you an idea of how bondage is brought down through the lineage. My mother, unfortunately, grew up in an abusive environment, not necessarily with her parents, but when her mother, unfortunately, got divorced from my grandfather, she began dating, men, of course, and some of those men just weren't very good men. So, they meet, they have I guess they say that not opposites attract, but people like you attract, or whatever. So they meet, they marry, they have myself, my little brother, and unfortunately 3 years later they split up, leaving me to live with my grandmother while they chased off and tried to figure their own lives out. So there's tons of stories there, but that's kind of where really things started, because I kind of felt like a normal childhood up until that point. My grandmother was, encouraging and empowering. In fact, I was telling somebody the other day on a show I was on recently that, she used to like pass out and lay down on the couch or whatever. And I would literally, while she was packed out, I'll go pick up one of her arms and just get under one of her arms, and she would just cuddle me down, right, and watch some cartoons, and and she was that special person to me. Yeah. Well, around the age of 9 years old, she comes to me, and I was I literally had a Transformer in one hand, a G.I. Joe in the other. Snake Eyes was kicking Bumblebee's butt. Having a battle royale. That's where my mentality was. I'm 9 years old. I mean, think about it. If you're watching right now or listening right now, like a 9-year-old, like what is their mental acuity? Right? They're not running businesses. They're not in college, right? They're barely spelling. Well, maybe I might have been spelling by then. Now I'm dyslexic, so I might have been spelling backwards, but I'm, either way, and she sits me down and says, "Hey, I need you to help me around the house." But when she did so with like massive tears in her eyes, which really kind of freaked me out. And lo and behold, come to find out later, she had cancer. We didn't, this is the mid 80s. Unfortunately, the chemo was just as damaging as the cancer, especially during that time, because it was, relatively brand new. And, she taught me how to basically cook and clean. And basically, if I could boil water, she taught me how to make it for my little brother and her. And then I also doubled as her crutch, going to and from the back bedroom, up to the bathroom, back to the back bedroom, up to the bathroom, over to the living room. And, I actually didn't have a problem doing that. I really didn't have a problem doing that. In fact, I wanted to be there for her. I wanted to take good care of her. I saw for a long time that she was alone. Fortunately, one of my aunts moved in maybe 6 or 8 months later and began to help out, but I was still needed. I was still doing the crutch work. I was still, pouring milk for my brother's cereal and, all that kind of stuff. And, and life, that's when life really got kind of wonky for me. you know, and then she passes away in 2011. I go live with my dad. My brother goes to live with my mom. My mom's in Florida. He's over here in, you know, Fuquay, North Kakalaki, like we talk about. And, you know, I just went to construction trade and began working and working and working and working and working. And so much so my body wakes me up at 5 a.m. every day. Right. So going through all that, and then, you know, just continue to work. And then my dad had a business, lost the business, went through foreclosures and repossessions, and craziness happened. Around the age of 17. I was forced to drop out of high school to basically help pay the bills. Right. Our lights were getting cut off on a regular basis.
Wow.
You know, you wake up to no power, you got cold water. Right. I was tired of having to get up and like basically dust myself off with a wash rag. And just, you know, again, granted, believe it or not, there are still a lot of Americans around the country that still live what I call less than paycheck to paycheck, right? Which means the paycheck doesn't even cover the needs for that week. And we were definitely in that crazy cycle. So junior year of high school, I get fed up. I drop out of high school, immediately go to work, meet my first mentor. I actually met him in summers prior to that. And he sees something in me that I didn't see in myself. And his name was Steve Myrick. And that man proceeded to help me change my life from the inside out with actually just two simple questions. The first was, what's the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And like a knucklehead, I said, well, duh, money. Of course it's money. A poor person doesn't have money. A rich guy has money, right? He said, absolutely not. It's the way they think. And then he asked me another powerful question right after that really, I think, started the bud of that transformation that would one day even lead me to Jesus, which is this question that says, well, do you want to think like me, or do you want to continue thinking like your father? Now, I'm not trying to hate on my dad. My dad's come an amazing long way. He's an amazing grandfather. He's done miracles in his own journey. God's done miracles in his life since all this happened. But this element is my story. And then, you know, I do the typical stupid stuff. I make a bunch of money, and then I blow all of it. Ultimately leading me homeless. And, you know, one of the people asked me, so what? The number one question everybody wants to ask you is, how did you become homeless? And I'm like, well, it's easy. Pride. The inability to receive and ask for help is how I ended up there. And fortunately, I found myself staring at myself in a public restroom. I'm about 21 years old at this time, and just being so mad at myself, like, how the heck did I get here? Like, seriously, a year ago, I'm driving a fancy sports car and flipping $100 bills at the you know, and this is Southern Town, right? So at the local pool hall and all this just. And what I was really searching for was identity, purpose, and meaning, right? And, you know, I've discovered that I've had to eliminate this, what I call martyrdom syndrome, right? I've been taking care of people for so long, always jumping in to try to fix their stuff on their behalf, that I've forgotten that if I'm going to live in God's will and in God's timing, then I have to open myself up and stop working so hard and let God work for me. Right. Wow. Yeah. So that's the early stages of the journey. And then, you know, Steve gives me a second shot that I didn't deserve, and literally built my first business out of the trash piles. And you know, that led me to you at some point in time, is unfortunately went through another turning point when I discovered that my executive team of that flagship business had allegedly, just for fun, allegedly embezzled $1.4 million. And
ouch.
And then try to disrupt the option. And then, I met you, it's probably 7 months later. We're going on a wild journey, but I mean, that's the early days. I don't know how much I can go deep, or we can keep it surface.
Well, so at that point you had, so at the point that you met me, it was like, fast forward 20 years, you've just been working your butt off, doing construction, built the company, ran crews, got more guys. And now you have you have 6 companies right now, right?
6 total.
And just one of your companies. And one of your companies employs like 400 people, right?
Yeah, it fluctuates a little bit. Three high threes or early 4s, but yeah.
Yeah, and of course that's the construction business and the world we live in. But now, you know, the way I see you is you're like the biggest siding guy, pretty much east of the Mississippi. You're like the East Coast siding guy, like king, right? Is that?
Well, I don't know if we're necessarily the biggest. We are a good sized company that I think the differentiator for us is we care. You know, we generally care about the people and the clients and everybody like that. And we'll do, on any given year, we might do over 3,000 homes a year. We got into large multifamily work about 3 years ago. That particular part of the business is on track to actually surpass the residential side this year. So there's a lot
Wow.
of, there's a lot of really good things, and all of it's God. None of it's me. So
Good attitude. I love that. Wow. And so now, when did you first feel the call to start your journey with Journey Principles and really start writing books? And I know for a period of time it was just building, building, and then at some point you just kind of hit this point where you're like, you know what, I really want to give back at a much larger level than just employing other people. What was that journey like for you?
Gosh, man. You know what? We almost have to go backwards to go forwards. The first time I ever heard God mention to me that I would not necessarily be doing construction all of my life was about 1 week in of starting the business that I own at starting the flagship company, where he said, "One day I will call you out of this." Now that's late 90s, maybe early, like that's late 90s. And about every 5 years I would be like, "Okay, Lord, is it time?" Because the business would kind of be running itself, and like, I'm bored. Like, give me something to do, right? Crews are doing their thing. I
Right.
was, the estimator, the accountant, all that, but I would have free time, and I was like, "Okay, God, is it time yet?" And the first couple of times, like, "No, it's not time yet." Another 5 years goes by. "God, is it time yet?" "No, it's not time yet." Well, in 2014, I asked that same question, and this time he just said, "Get prepared." So I get all excited and stuff like that, and I end up having this interesting, I guess, road trip, if you will. As you know, I'm, spent a lot of time with Dave and Sharon Ramsey for a number, going to their events off and on for about 10 years, and got to know them pretty well and their team really well. But on one of these trips specifically, I'm driving to Nashville, Tennessee, actually Franklin, where their offices are located.
Yeah.
And on the way up there, I have a couple of my team members in the truck with me because they're going to the event themselves, right? They're going there themselves. And I'm not thinking anything about it. I'm going up there. They had something at the time called immersion coaching, which means I would go up there and I would literally be coached by Dave's team in Dave's meetings. So you would literally sit in and shadow their team going through their management style, how they did things, how they did agendas and culture and all this kind of stuff. And as we were going through that, I walked upstairs to another friend of mine, John Felkins, and we're sitting there and we're kind of like doing the coaching session, if you will. And he looks over at me and he's like, "Have you ever thought about being a speaker?" I'm like, "No." I'm thinking, dude, I'm a construction guy. What do I know about speaking? "I don't know, man. You're super dynamic. You're good at stories, and you're passionate. And I don't know. I just think there's something I think there's something there." I was like, "Man, I got a construction business I got to run. Appreciate the love. No worries." He's like, well, he gets on his phone. He goes, right. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You ready for lunch?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do something." "Mexican?" "Yeah, Mexican." "Okay, cool." Run off to the restaurant, have some lunch. He's on his phone, off and on his phone the whole time. Get back in the car, drive back to Dave's building, walk in the door. He says, "Hey, before we get started, I'm going to go introduce you to somebody." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Okay, cool." So he takes me upstairs, third floor, back corner office, walks me in. There's this guy named Jeremy Breland sitting there. Now, for those of you who don't know, Jeremy Breland is the person who actually basically hires all of Ramsey's personalities. Okay. So I sit down, and John's sitting in the chair across the way from me. He's smiling, got a big old ear to ear grin. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm trying to, what's going on here? Like, why am I sitting here? The guy proceeds to interview me. And I'm like, what in the world's going on? Finishes. He says, yeah, John's right. Yeah, you're dynamic and stories. And yeah, but we just probably need a little more, get a little more reps under your belt to get you started. I'm like, sure. Right. Whatever. Walk out the door. I get back to the office, like, "John, what in the world just happened?" He's like, "I was just trying to get you on the speaker team." So let me get this straight, dude. You created a interview for me that I did not ask for and threw me for a curveball. Now, what's interesting about that is on the drive home, it had me thinking, like, is this something I should be doing? And then actually in the dream interpretation, which I know we'll get to a little bit that you did for me, you you've made a comment like, what construction guy has a platform, right? And you're like, "Oh, Jesus." So I was like, good point. But just that's how I got started. My first book came out a few months later. It did better than expected. And the typical artist, or not artist, but a typical author says, if one book changes one person's life, then it's worth it. And then you get that story and you're like, well, if just two people, right? And then it's like, then 100, if just 100 people. And then, you kind of build up the ramp and, lo and behold, I started speaking. I started writing blogs and started doing content, started trying to serve wherever I could. And, I had people throughout my life from about 2014 all the way to 2017 that had prophesied specific words about me. And many of them didn't know each other and like across the town, and they would say almost the identical thing. And,
Wow.
and all that. And essentially what happened next was, I built a business. I started doing that. And then while I was doing that, apparently my former executive team decided that they didn't need me anyway. Right. But they didn't want to tell me that. So they just tried to do it under the cover, so to speak. And
Yeah. Wow.
So I go through hell. I mean, I have to shut down my Journey Principles Institute business. What is essentially the entity behind all things Transform You. I was notified the night of my first ever Transform You that all this was going on. Right. So I'm supposed to walk on stage in literally 6 hours, and teach. Through God's sheer grace, I managed to not only do the event, but then also, go back to building that business. And I was in, call it struggle mode is not the right word, but it was the most difficult thing that I had faced, other than being homeless. Meaning, I had a beautiful bride, I had several kids, and then I turned right around and actually went through the next piece, which was, basically working with them and not seeing them for 2 years. And lo and behold, that sets up the stage for me to meet you roughly a year later.
Wow. Now that's an interesting story how we met. But yeah, you're going through, I mean, you've built from the ground up, like literally what they call a self-made person or a God-made person, just built your whole empire that you live in, 6 businesses. Now you're giving back, and one of the things too that really has stuck with me that's touched me about just I've learned from you about being around you and what you're wanting to create with Transform You and even with Journey Principles is the idea of serve the person that you used to be, which is back when you started, back when you had nobody, back when nobody believed in you. What would it be like to have somebody like you now and, 8-figure companies and all these things and success to be able to invest time and resources into somebody that everybody else would discard as kind of nothing. Yeah. So you kind of went out on a limb and away from what you were comfortable with, which was construction and obviously really, really good at, and said, I'm going to become the speaker. I'm going to begin investing in the lives of other people. And you started doing that. And then you hit this roadblock, which is $1.4 million embezzled from you and your company, which very well could. I mean, it's only by the grace of God, probably, that it didn't tank the whole empire, cause 400 people to lose their jobs. I mean, it just, I can't imagine the heartache that you were going through. And in the midst of that, right around that time, you got a prophetic word from a friend of yours that set you on a journey, right? Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think it just goes to show that no matter how crazy life is or what you're facing or how held back you feel like you are, you're really actually on time. And I didn't really realize that until even our conversation and getting to know each other. But about a year before I met you, I met a guy by the name of Evan Burks, mutual good friend of both of ours now. Yeah. That I met at a Power and Love conference that ironically Todd White was at. And he walked up to me. We set up the lights and the stuff together. I got there a day early because I jacked my calendar up. So, so I got to help out, put the stage together and whatnot, got to know him. And he walks up to me one day and he says, God told me to partner with you. Now, what I didn't know at the time, I know now, is that Evan told me that was the first word that God ever gave him to deliver to somebody else.
Wow.
Which is really profound. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with it because I went there as broken Stephen, like Stephen that's hurting and in pain and struggling. And my wife was insistent, you have to go to this event. You have to go to this event. You have to go to this event. And God did. He met me. He met me in the pulpit area on the floor crying and, acting all goofy and, whatever. And Evan reaches out to me, gosh, probably 6 months after the event, maybe 7 months after the event. And he had, like me, admired Sean, like Sean Bowles that we both know. And he was like, hey, Sean's going to be in town over here in South Carolina. So we scheduled a guys retreat to go see Sean speak over at Morningstar, right?
Mhm.
Well, about 3 months after that, out of the blue, he sends me a text message. He's like, you have to go to this event. I'm like, what event? What are you talking about? He sends me a link. I open the link. I was like, dude, it's a Kingdom. I think it's called Kingdom Luncheon with Sean, Bob Hassan, and I think Chris Valentin.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, we're gonna see Sean like 2 months from now. Why don't you go to no, you need to go to this event. This event. Now, what he didn't know, and I hadn't told a soul on the planet, was that I had been in my closet praying like nobody's business, because by that time my organization was not necessarily back to normal, but it was getting back to its operational standards, right? It wasn't perfect, but it was getting back there. And I've always had this yearning back to transform you, back to this initiative of, teaching people how to serve the person they used to be, and all this kind of stuff. And inevitably, he's like super insistent. I'm like, dude, no, why? I don't get it. I said, and to get him off the phone, I was like, fine. I make a deal with you, knowing that my calendar looks like a Christmas tree normally. Right. I said, if I have nothing on that day, then I will sign up and I'll go and I'll fly out to Texas.
Safe bet.
I thought safe bet. And sure enough, the only day, that entire year was this open window and this open door, which just on the surface, check this out. That means God had already ordained it from the time that literally I was stepping on stage and I thought my business was falling apart and I was never going to make it. And I was with my family and everything. God had already redeemed everything all the way to that moment. Because if you think about it, my calendar fills up every 2 or 3 weeks ahead, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So it means God had already ordained that day was going to be open, because nobody asked me for meetings that day, etc. So anyway, I find that funny, but
that's amazing.
So sure enough, I wake up at 4 a.m. It's the only day. It's a day trip for me. I fly to Texas and fly back in the same day. Mm-hmm. And I've been in my closet asking God, can I pick Journey Principles back up? Can I pick Transform You back up? Am I supposed to do this? If I do it, will my business fall apart again? If I'm over here, I don't want that to happen. And I had just a lot of unanswered questions. But I wasn't thinking about that on the way to Texas. I was more thinking about, why is he sending me to Texas? Like, why does Evan was so certain. Like, he was so certain, it was unbelievable. Wow. I land in the airport. I do an Uber all the way to Soldier Church. I think it's the name of the church. Yep. And as I'm sitting there typing on my computer, because it's, they're in Texas, an hour behind us here in North Carolina. And he sends me a message, said, hey, has the event started yet? I'm like, no. He's like, okay, cool. Cool. Let me call you. So he picks up the phone and calls me. Okay, hey, what's up, man? He goes, so you're going to get a word from God while you're there. It's going to be a really important word. It's going to come from a guy with almost like a facial beard, or kind of a goatee. He's going to have slick back hair. He's going to pull his hair back. He wear a dark color blazer. Yeah. So you just keep an eye out for him. You'll know him when he touches you. I'm like, okay. Now it's getting weird for me. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, now I grew up in an environment that's, supernaturally inclined, but not necessarily supernaturally constantly present. Right. Right. So he's doing that. And an older gentleman about that time walks up behind me, and maybe in his 80s, and super sweetest guy ever. Right. Problem was I didn't want to be messed with. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to go and sit down, figure out what the heck I was doing there. And, this old guy comes up and he's like, hey, I know you. I'm like, I doubt it. He's like, no, seriously. I just saw you down in Austin yesterday. Man, I'm telling you, I saw you down in Austin. I'm like, it wasn't me. I live in Raleigh. I don't know. There's just something about you. Now, hindsight being 2020, this guy had my grandfather's presence. Oh, wow. And my grandfather had an almost angelic presence before he passed away. Right? He loved the Lord like nobody's business. Mm-hmm. Referred to me from the day I was born all the way to the day he passed away in 2016 as his little soul winner. Mm-hmm. He introduced me to people. And so this guy's like talking to me. He's like insistent. And then about that time they open the doors to go sit down. And he's like, will you sit with me? And I'm like, yeah. Okay, fine. I'll come sit with you. And he's just chatty Cathy, like just chatting it up. And then about that time, a couple sits down across from us at the table, and they look at me like, hey, I know you. how'd you like that restaurant last night? It was amazing, wasn't it? I'm like, it wasn't me. It's like, no,
Twilight
seriously.
Zone.
Yeah, dude, I'm getting wigged out big time. And no, seriously, I'm telling you, you look so familiar. Are you on TV? Are you on TV programs or like something like that? I said, well, I used to, yeah, right. I was like, I used to, speak and stuff like that. I had a decent social following at one time, but I'm not really doing that anymore.
Well, it's better than you got a face for radio, right?
This is true. Yes, it's true. I definitely don't have a head for Paul Mitchell, that's for sure. But
that's for sure.
But then this young African American woman sits down to the right of us, and she looks at me. Actually, she was going around the table. She said, "What's your name?" And the guy's like, "My name's Bob. My name's so and so. My name's so and so. My name's so and so." She gets to me. She goes, "And what's your name, sweetie?" I'm like, "It's Steven." "Oh, you're the crown one." My face went white and flush. Now, I know that Stephen with a PH, either in Greek or Hebrew, actually stands for crown. I get that. So I kind of like quickly rationalized that away. But then I get a text message from Evan. And he's like, so have you met him yet? I'm like, no. He said, what's going on? I said, well, everybody in this room seems to think that they know me.
Wow.
Evan's exact words. Well, that's a good sign. And then crickets. All right. I get uncomfortable. I grab my plate. I walk over to the buffet line. I grab a plate, and then I'm kind of going through the line. About the time this big tall guy with a big beard comes up to me, and he shakes my hand. He's like, "Hey, how are you doing? How's your family? Your family good? Man, it's so good to see you. How long's it been?" Thinking to myself, I don't know you either.
It's been forever.
Exactly, it's been really forever. Hand him his plate and stuff like that. I grab my food. I go quickly, like just go to my plate and start shoveling food down my throat and kind of ignoring it. Sean gets up. He's actually kind of acting like the MC of the event more than anything else in this particular event. Gets up and he introduces the first speaker. Well, the first speaker was Chris Valentin, which I didn't know at the time, but he was the guy that I just talked to at the lunch line, which was crazy. And the event was amazing. They had great stories. Bob Hassan, who I later got to know a little bit. Since then I come to find out much of our stories are similar. There's some similar parts.
Yeah.
But in this particular scenario, he shares his story about how he almost lost his painting business in the course of 2 years. And so I feel it a little bit, right? But I'm still like, I know that's not him, and nobody else that I've met so far is him. So, okay, no big deal. And then we get towards the tail end of the event. Everybody, I'm like, okay, well, it's like, okay, so I'm going to leave here. Nothing happened. Phew, no problem. And then Sean grabs the microphone. He's like, okay, guys, well, we're before we do the activation with the group, we want to spend a little time and just take your questions. Sound good? Okay, great. And so he's, okay, does anybody have any questions? And myself and like 10 other people raise our hands. Sean keeps talking for another 10 minutes and then turns around. It's like, well, since there's no questions, everybody's like, dude, hands up. Right. I legitimately have a question that I want to ask the panel. I do not remember what that question was.
I was going to say, what was that question exactly, Steve?
Yeah, I don't remember what the question was, but I do remember walking over to the stage. And for those of you who don't know, I'm 5'5" or 5 foot nothing, as they say in the South. And Sean is like 6 foot something, right? He's a big dude, tall guy. And he starts talking, he's talking to the panel. He puts his right hand on my shoulder, like he's kind of resting his elbow kind of thing, because I'm right there at, this is literally just where his arm is, and so he's talking, and then out of nowhere, he's like, okay. And he goes, so what's your question? And just for the sake of the microphone, I'm going to pull the microphone away because this is what came out. Right out of nowhere, I start bawling like a baby. I'm in front of.
That's pretty accurate. I remember that moment.
Oh,
I think everybody there remembers that moment.
Yeah, well, there's part of the reason why
I
haven't hide from the Christian community for a while because they might recognize me or something. But yeah, I was just completely blown away. And then I looked up at Sean with tears in my eyes, and his eyes are about this big. Like, the average entrepreneur goes through bankruptcy twice in their career. And I was like, you don't understand. I didn't lose anything. God left it. And he's like, if you need prayer, I've got some folks in the back. Hey guys. Yeah. See these guys back there waving their hands. Why don't you go have a conversation and pray with them? They'll pray with you right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. I start walking towards the back of the room. My head's down, right? Especially all these people that I just sat with that swore up and down they knew me. And here I just lost my stuff in front of everybody. tears
Wow.
all over my face. And
Such a good moment.
for some of us. Sean later told me, he goes, dude, I just realized you were having a massive Holy Spirit moment. It's almost like it was so much of the Holy Spirit overcoming you at one time.
Yeah.
And, hindsight being 2020, I did have a massive emotional release, clearly. But I didn't have to pick back up again. But I walk into the back of the room and got these two guys back there, and I've got my head down, so I'm not really paying attention to them. And they're like, "Oh, all right, so what's going on? What's going on?" I'm like, "Well, my business." And they're like, "You want to go talk in another room?" Yeah. So we walk to a back room. They sit me down. My head's down the entire time. And then this guy, I'm like he's like, "Well, what's going on?" I'm like, "Well, this, and this, and this, and this." And then he goes, "So, have you had any dreams recently?" And I was like, "Hey, jackass, you didn't hear a word I said, did you?" Like, that's not cool, man.
Wow. That was so funny, man. You were pouring your heart out. You were talking about, man, I got $100 million a year company. I got this, I got that, and all this stuff. God called me into ministry. I was ready to turn it over. I turned it over. I handed it over to my people. And next thing I know, we got $1.5 million, $2 million goes missing. I know God called me into ministry, but what do I do here? I got to jump back in and save this, or my 400 employees are going to lose their job. And I'm just thinking, I've done a lot of work in strategy and finance, but I've never had a company that size, and not really sure. Really comfortable in my lane. And Sean was doing the whole Modern Prophetic Symposium that weekend. And that was like the Thursday or the Friday, just the businessmen's luncheon. But then there was the whole weekend that we thought everybody was going to. In fact, I was surprised to find you just came in for the 1 or 2 hour luncheon and flew right out.
Event. Yep. Just that one event.
That was crazy. So you're telling me all this, and I'm like, okay, God, just kind of, if you're ever part of the prayer or the prophetic team, you're just kind of like listening, but at the same time, like, okay, God, what do I need to do? And God said, ask him if he has any dreams. Yeah. And so the way that it came out, it felt like I ignored everything that you just said.
Yes, it did. I'm just saying it hurt me for a really long time. I've really had to work hard to forgive you. I'm just kidding.
It was like, so have you had any dreams lately? And you're like, well, actually, it kind of pulled you totally out of the emotion and the trauma of the moment.
And the dreams came like instantaneously. Whoop,
it was
right there at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, do you remember the dreams?
Yeah. I remember two. Actually, I remember all three, but I remember two of them super clear. Yeah. And you have my permission if you want to share the actual, because you guys end up recording the interpretation.
I think we did, yeah.
Which I've actually shared with a few people, and they're like, "Yeah, they're right," kind of thing, which is pretty crazy. But so the first dream that I had was I was on a large jumbo jet. I wouldn't call it it was somewhere in between a private plane and a normal jumbo jet, like first class or something. Like I was sitting in an executive compartment of this airplane. And the entire time I'm on the airplane, I'm thinking to myself, I hope my bags are there. I know last time I lost my bags, all this kind of stuff. And sure enough, the plane lands. I'm going through the airport. They're going to put me into a truck or a black SUV. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, cool. Where's my bag? Where's my bag? Where's my coat? Where's my coat? I need my blazer. I'm freaking out about this blazer that I'm supposed to be wearing. I drive up to a stadium building. And as I'm walking up to the front door, the glass door opens to my right, and I'm walking in, and it's Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey hands me a headset, like a microphone and a headset, and says, "Hurry up, you're late. You're about to get on stage." I'm like, "I don't have my jacket on." He's like, "Dude, just go get on stage. Go." And then I walk up through what I guess the backstage area is onto the stage, and then literally the faces were countless. I could feel the heat of the lights on my face, and then I woke up. So that was dream number one.
Wow.
Dream number two, I had just bought a live event center where I'm actually recording today from. And I bought it with the intention of not knowing if I'd ever be able to use it for my live events. And I kind of bought it for the construction company, but I thought, well, one of the reasons I got embezzled is because I had offices in different locations and I couldn't be in both offices at the same time. If I ever think I can bring this back, I'll just merge the stuff together. Right. And I'm thinking through that and no big deal. But in this particular dream, there's a leather Chesterfield couch and it's sitting against the wall. And I'm sitting there and I'm having a conversation with a guy by the name of Todd White. So some of your audience probably know who Todd is. Mm-hmm. And he and I are chatting it up and just a good old thing. And then, but in this picture, Todd typically wears a black t-shirt with his orange and yellow lion logo for Lifestyle Christianity.
Yeah.
Well, in this particular dream, the color of the shirt was basically the color of this light blue back here. Well, over here somewhere. There we go. Oh, yeah, basically back there. The light blue there was like a royal blue, and the lion was bright white.
Wow.
And then he gets up, and they come over the door, and they say, "Hey, Todd, you're on." Todd goes up, goes out. You know, in dreams, like, you know that it's been a while, but they come back in like a split second. You know, because you know, in a dream you can like walk on the ceiling and all kinds of stuff, right? Well, he walks back through, goes to sit back down. So, how was it, man? That's awesome. He goes and he takes off the headset and he hands it to me, and he says, "Dude, it's your turn. Go up and share the gospel. It's your turn. It's your turn." And I'm like, but I'm not, okay. And I walk up these stairs that are actually in my office even today that take you onto the stage. Now, what's interesting about my building is my live event center will only seat maybe 300 to 400 people from a live audience. We had not installed the technology at the time to handle multi-thousand virtual audience that we have now. But at this particular moment, I walk out on the stage. The same thing happens with the Dave Ramsey dream. Lights are up, feel the heat of the lights, except from the stage, I can see a stadium. And then I wake up. The third dream is still a little bit cloudy. But essentially in the third dream, I was helping other speakers actually go and help them actually get what they needed to speak. So remember, if we walk through, it's like a movie theater, we walk through the candy line and all that kind of stuff, and into a bathroom, and the bathroom had stuff that had to be wiped off the walls, and whoever I was walking with, so like, you're going to speak over here. It was like a small venue, and another room, it's like, this is a bigger venue, and you're going to speak here. And then we walk out and it's like a massive venue, and you're going to speak here with me. Right. Come to find out, this will blow your mind. So I started a new program. So technically it's business number 7, a few months ago, called Brand Amplifiers, where I help speakers get the video assets and the content that they need to launch their speaking careers, because I put them on my stage at a live conference, and then I have my team record it all and edit it all.
Wow. That's
so
amazing.
That dream has come true 100%.
Yes, it has.
Yeah. But so those are the dreams. I'm not sure if you want to play the interpretations for people, if you just want to tell them what it was, but it was pretty powerful.
Well, what did you take? Now the thing that sticks out the most, first of all, was the juxtaposition between Dave Ramsey, a well-known business guy, and Todd White, a well-known ministry guy, and the difference of what's on the top of their heads or not.
Yeah.
I remember obviously the bald Dave Ramsey, and then the dreads of Todd White. And I know one of the things that, and to me, this is the strong, and I want to hear your takeaway, but this is the strongest takeaway, was the idea, like, you were mourning the potential loss of your business.
Yeah.
Not because it was like, I need money, because, man, you're great. Like, you're good. You're like, you got your stuff and your stuff stockpiled and all that, but because of the 400 people that were working for you. And I was just like, man, and I just heard, what does the symbol of Todd White mean? I'm asking God, and I heard he's a dread champion, and of course, Todd with the dreads. I'm just like, and it's funny because I was thinking about that even as you were telling your story about, playing on the floor at 9 years old. You're a warrior. You got the Transformers and you got the Avengers, and they're fighting. And I'm like, you're a warrior. You've always been a warrior. That's been part of your identity from day one.
Yep.
Whether you had to go out and pick a fight and find somebody to fight, or whether you were fighting for 400 or 500 people that you wanted to stay employed and be able to feed their families. But to me, that was the biggest takeaway. And then, of course, the idea of the mantle and leaving your baggage behind, not feeling ready to speak. Then the next one was being a little bit more ready, and then to training others and providing a platform. But what was the biggest takeaways in your mind?
Man, there were so many. I'll tell you one of the things that really stuck with me is, you remember Evan said that I would know it when the guy touched me. Right now, up until this time, I'm walking in this room with you guys. No one's touched me. Like, I'm probably scared to touch me. It's like, this guy's going to go electrify himself. But about that time, you at the end of the interpretation, you offered to pray, and of course, you never turn down prayer, especially when you're a hot mess like I was. So you began praying, but when you began praying, you began like brushing my back, but like a sharp stroke, right? And the crazy thing is, the only image I could see in my mind when you were doing that were actually 2 images. I saw my grandfather, and then I also saw what looked like a knife edge that was literally cutting arrows out of my back.
Mm.
So every time you would swipe, I would
Mm.
watch arrows disappear and knives disappear.
Mm.
Right. And that's always stuck with me because I felt like a human, emotional, mental punching bag. Like I legitimately felt that. And I was desperate for some relief, for some relief. So that's one of the major things that I took away. I was not expecting the dread champion thing. But when you began to break it down, in the dream interpretation and later in our friendship and stuff like that, I was like, I really have been at war like my entire life, like as far as I can remember. Right. Been the guy who takes it upon myself to go and then take care of other people, my grandmother, my father, my brother, my team, my spouse, right. Their spouses or their parents. Like I've always been that person. And I'll tell you, one of the things that God has shown me in the last probably 12 months specifically is, you know who King David is, right? I'm just kidding. Yeah, we all know who King David is. So, the early part of David's life, he's hidden, right? He's chased, he's ostracized, he's all this kind of stuff. Then he becomes king. And while he's still king, and also while he was during being ostracized, he was at war and at war and battle on a regular basis. Was a very good warrior, right?
He was always at war, man.
Yeah, exactly. But at
Except
a point,
the one time he wasn't when he should have been.
Exactly.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, I've been reconciling this thing, and this word martyr comes up a lot, has been coming up a lot the last year. Almost like God saying, don't be a martyr, right? Almost like I can sense Christ in you, but Christ has already done the martyrship that you don't need to do.
Right.
Right. And even if you play the dream interpretation for your audience, one of the things that you'll even hear you say is, you're doing all of this. You don't know what's going to work, but you're still putting yourself in there. And ultimately, and you actually say this, ultimately, it's not your responsibility to know whether or not it works. Right. That's God's responsibility. So what I've been shifting towards recently is rather than going to war, I've been teaching other people how to fight.
That's so good. Wow. That's what a king does, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Wow. That's so beautiful. So I just love, you didn't tell me this, of course, our first meeting. And then we stayed in touch and we got on the phone, and then you're like, hey, I want to fly you out to the Carolinas, come and stay with me and my family. Let's go to the mountains. Let's hang out. Let's see, and I was just like, wow, okay. And so I came out there, and then you began to kind of tell me the story about Evan and how, basically that you felt and he felt that the whole purpose of your trip for that 2-hour, 1-hour conference, whatever it was just a business luncheon, was to meet a guy that you were going to connect with and that you would know who it was when he touched you. And it was interesting because I remember, I'm not, I'm a business guy, so I'm not really big into prophetic like signs and stuff. I mean, I am, but I'm not the guy that like goes all over the country and blows the shofar and does stuff. I love those people that do that, but I'm just, I deal with business people a lot. And so I was like, don't be weird, dude. Just keep it cool.
I already blew the lid off of weirdness that day. So.
Yeah, you kind of own weirdness that day. Like everybody was like looking for the security guards. Like, who is this guy? He's built.
Well, his whole table says they know him.
I know, right? They were just like, all right. So I think Sean was just looking for the biggest dude in the back of the room. Like, John, can you come and pray for him? Like, quick. It was fun, man.
I guarantee you, Sean and Bob will never forget it. I guarantee they'll never forget.
Oh, no, they won't, man. I love those guys too. Sean and Bob are incredible, and Chris even. And it was so funny because it was the very end of the conference. Like they were talking about business stuff and they were sharing their stuff. And Bob is so kind of laid back and kind of almost talks in a whisper, and Sean just has a gentle personality too. He's not like a screamer prophet, and so it was just kind of a laid back, chill kind of conference. And then this guy gets up to the mic and starts, wailing, sobbing. It was incredible, though. It was like you definitely had everybody's attention. So, we're like, what's going to happen next? Like, who is this guy?
So check this out. So, so essentially at the end of the dream interpretation, we both discover that God says, yes, you can pick this back up. Yes, I've got you. Yeah. Not only do I have you, it's going to be different than before, and I'm going to be doing it. In other words, I'm going to be doing like it's going to come to you with less effort kind of thing.
Yeah.
And true to Stephen fashion, I was like, awesome. Let me help you do it, God. Right. Right. So, me getting in his way and stuff like that. It's just, I'm learning this in this new stage of life of being still to the best of my ability. I'm spending a lot more time praying to say, but meditating to listen. Right. So intentionally not saying a word, trying to settle my spirit down so I can hear. And I think that's why he's been talking to me more recently than he's been giving me dreams. Because I know that dreams happen in the subconscious mind. And a lot of times, one of the things I think you do so well is you got all these different concepts that are put together in a dream. You have a natural ability that I don't know that people fully understand to, in the moment, connect the dots. Right. I mean, literally in the moment. And when people go and listen to the track, if they ever want to, the crazy part is you literally interpret the dream within 2 minutes of me telling you what both dreams are, back to back, right? In a very clear, very concise way, so much way that it actually spoke to me and said, okay, now's the time. Now's the time, and through our friendship, one of the things that I've discovered a long time ago is, sometimes God sends you somewhere. He sent me there just for our meeting. He did. I even have friends of mine who are not people of faith, right? And they even said, yeah, you definitely, there has to be something out there because you literally went from here to here. I mean, I flew out 30 minutes after our conversation.
Wow. Crazy.
Completely wrecked. Right. And then, if you think about it, we did our follow-up Transform You conference in October of 2001. And the people that I had the car to speak with me and alongside of me are some incredibly well-known national thought leaders. What the interesting thing about what God's been doing with that prophetic understanding or that clarity that you brought to those dreams with that is he's positioned me in the middle. So I'm not all in the faith community. I'm not all in the secular community. I'm in the middle. And I feel like I'm translating back and forth, if you will, for people to kind of take a step and begin walking towards the direction and giving them the tools to fight and all this kind of stuff. And God used you in a big way that day, big way. And then about 6 months later, I could just feel your spirit. It's like, I need rest. I need rest. I said, well, come out and hang out with us, buddy.
Yeah, man, that was such a good trip.
And then you got to meet Evan.
I did. Yeah. And his wife.
Yep.
And we had a whole transformation moment right there in the dining room of Chick-fil-A talking about dreams to his wife. I didn't even go there to meet his wife. I didn't know his wife was going to be there. I'm there to meet this guy, Evan. And we end up having a conversation about dreams with her that was just incredible. That was amazing just in itself. That was worth the trip down there to see those guys was, man.
Well, I think that's why we can only see each other every so often, because every time we get connected, something really amazing happens for other people around.
Yeah. Then we got to take like 6 months or a year to like process it all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, man, we've had some good times. But yeah, it's interesting too, because I love the fact that Evan said you'll know when the guy touches you. Because my first thought would be, some guy's gonna touch me? Like what? And again, I'm not super big into like, let's dance around you and remove the arrows and war cry. And it wasn't any of that, but I just felt the need to like brush stuff off your back. And I'm always like, okay, I'll take the risk. It might not mean anything, but I just really felt like I saw you as this warrior on a battlefield, taking the hits, but as that lone warrior fighting the onslaught of the best the enemy had, like that clip in Troy. And we've talked about this.
Yeah, you've said that to me 2 or 3 times when I'm having a down day.
I know, right, man? Where Brad Pitt comes out there and he fights the giant and he just runs at him and slays him and keeps on running and gets to the head of the mountain, or to the head of the army, and he just,
is there anyone else?
Is there no one else? Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. I just love that. But in fact, your website, let me pull up your website, because your website reminds me of that look, like just the fierceness of it. But I'm so glad I did take the risk to just like rub what I saw as the arrows off your back, because, not knowing, that was one of the things that your grandfather did, and, just what it would mean to you, or that you had been given a prophetic word. Yeah. There's the lion roaring right there.
What's really crazy is my grandfather used to tell me back in the day, before I was truly a believer, he said, you have to be 1 part lion and 1 part lamb. and
Oh,
God's
wow.
wisdom will tell you tell you when basically will tell you the difference, like when to be one, when to be another.
Wow. That's incredible, man. Well, I just love what you've done. I love the excellence with which you build everything you build. And man, this is just, it's been a pleasure to be part of your life. And the things, it's funny too, how God will bring things around too, because after, it was that trip that I came out to just get some rest. You just were right. You nailed it, man. Dude, come on. You need a break. Come on, get some rest. And a lot of the things that I'm experiencing now, in fact, even having a show like this was something that we had talked about. In fact,
Sitting at my kitchen counter, I was like, dude,
the very first website I had,
you need this, you need that, you need this, you need that. And you're like, I don't want to do any of that. I want to go this direction. I'm like, I'm telling you, he's going to pull you back over here.
Need to build this. And I'm like, no.
Build this over here that he'll let you do this other thing. But you got to build this first. I don't want to. I'm okay, fine.
Yep. And you're like, well, no, man. And so you even did it. Well, fine, I'll build it. So you built this whole website for me, and just about, interpreting dreams and providing spiritual intelligence to CEOs. We called it the corporate intelligence program. And we had this whole thing built out and ready to go. And then of course, 2020 hit. And then it was just kind of a year in the cave, where it was just kind of hiding. And it was during that time, though, that as I continued to, we would have conversations. A couple other friends of mine, hedge fund managers and CEOs of companies would talk. And there were just divine connections that God put me in their lives, like yours. And so I started doing these dream reports, and they were like a presidential daily brief style.
Oh, they were massive, by the way, because I got to read a couple of them. They were massive, massive briefings.
Wow.
Full of information.
Yeah, I just, I'm locked alone in a 4-bedroom house in the middle of the pandemic. Nothing's happening. Church is shut. The gym's closed. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess I'm just going to do dream stuff. And I think I did like 55 of those executive style dream reports or dossiers that year. And it really helped me to have a base of launching into what I do right now, which is spiritual.
We've seen some of that dream stuff that you interpreted, those dossiers come to pass already. Some stuff hasn't come to pass just yet, but I know it will. Some stuff already has.
Some stuff, yeah. And some of the stuff that you said to me too, where you were like, hey man, you should do this and you should do that. And I wasn't ready to kind of be out there. I was like, I don't really want to have a show. I don't really need to be known. I just kind of want to hide. And I was sensing like that season in the cave, and that's what 2020 was. Yeah. And then I hit 2021 and I met some key people in my life that are just, they were influencers, and they're like, you need to meet these people and you need to be doing this. And the next thing I know, here I am.
Now you have a show.
Just what you said.
I won't say I told you so, but I'll say he told you.
You
so.
told me so, man. You totally told me so. I heard it there first, but before anybody else was saying, man, you need.
Well, and the crazy part is I recognized your cave season because I had just come out of one, or I was actually coming out of one, right? Like even when you came to my place, like I was still more involved in the construction side than the thought leadership side.
That's true. Yeah.
So, but I could sense it, and one of the things I love about God is if we let, a lot of times when you meet someone and they kind of coach you on something, or they give you instructions from God, like you did with the dream interpretation, it's really easy to get lost in a relationship where that person's the mentor and that person's the student, right? And one of the things I've loved about our relationship specifically is we tend to do this, right? At any given moment, I'm the mentor, you're the student. At any given moment, you're the mentor, I'm the student. And I think what I call ping pong partners are a lifeblood. I think they breed ideas. I think they breed new innovation and stuff like that. And sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help us see ourselves. And I heard this author say this one time. He said it's hard to read the label while you're inside the jar. Right?
That's good.
And I was like, oh, that's so good. That's so good. And I think everybody needs that. And the one thing I would hope to leave with people today is, one, not only is God real, he does talk to you. He will put people in your life to help you understand what it is he's saying to you if you're having a hard time listening. I'm a pretty hard listener. Like I struggle listening. It's one of my things, right? But on top of that, he's got a bigger vision for yourself than you can even possibly imagine. Right? We start looking at what God has been doing recently in both of our lives, and hopefully how we're transforming the landscape around us. And it just goes to show that if you'll surrender yourself to God, God will pull that stuff out of you and then put you on a platform. One of the things I didn't share was before the embezzlement, When I was speaking and I wanted to fast forward all those prophetic words. New York Times bestselling author, world stages, speaking everywhere, flying private planes. It's going to be amazing. I'm like, yeah, let's go now. Come on. Right. I remember this one key moment after the embezzlement, about 6 or 8 months in. I had a friend of mine that had prophesied some of that stuff over me. And she actually came to my first event and she walked up to me. I was going to give her a big hug and she saw me about to start just break down and cry. And she goes, "Oh no, honey. Oh no, honey. This is the cost of the calling. You don't get to go where you're going without going through this door."
Wow.
And it both infuriated me and it hurt me at the same time. Cause I was like, you're not listening. You don't care. Wherever I heard that before. Right. But I was in that moment, but you fast forward another 6 or 8 months, I'm sitting in her house and I'm crying. Apparently 2019 was my year of crying. But I was crying all over the place. And I was like, I don't want it. You can have the stage. You can have the book. You can have this. I don't want it anymore. I don't want it. It's too hard. No, thank you. And then she looks at me with just as much clarity. And she goes, now you're ready for it. You get what I'm saying? And I think that's where God's taking people. I think he's only going to establish people on platforms that understand the weight of the platform. You know this about me, but one of the things that I do weird, because I'm weird like this, is I wear white tennis shoes anytime I'm presenting. If I'm speaking on stage, I'm wearing white tennis shoes.
Yeah.
And it's a subtle reminder for me to wear those tennis shoes to remind me that I'm walking on holy ground. In other words, the person that put me on that stage, I have more responsibility to than I do to me wanting to put myself on larger stages. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's just a reminder. Hey, you're walking on holy ground. You're right, God. I'm sorry. I can humble myself. So hopefully he doesn't have to humble me, because his humblings are pretty powerful.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Well, man, as always, such a rich time talking to you. Thank you for taking the time to be on the show today, and just love your story. I love our history. I love your friendship and your wisdom, and man, just the success that you're doing. I'm just so glad when people get to meet you and have the opportunity to learn from some of the things, whether it's journey principles or transform you, man, I love your heart to serve the person that you used to be. You're such an example to all of us as a king, as a warrior, as a dread champion. Man, it's an honor to just know you and be in your life, Stephen. Thanks again for being here.
Dude, always. And the feeling is very much mutual, my friend. I'm enjoying watching your rapid rise.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Well, guys, thanks again for joining us on another edition of Dream Talks. Just such a rich time, an amazing day. And I love when I get to bring my friends on, just people that I know that have just lived such incredible lives and are doing great things. So let me leave you with, if you're interested in the spiritual intelligence mentorship and you want to know a little bit more of what that looks like, I'm just going to leave you with this short clip that explains a little bit about that. In 2018, a conversation between two friends sparked the question, if we really believe we can hear from God in dreams, visions, prophecy, why isn't there a full-time intelligence agency using these gifts to help keep America safe? Over the next year, the need for this agency was confirmed through multiple dreams, and the Spiritual Intelligence Service was born. Spiritual intelligence is the gathering and analysis of information from righteous spiritual sources to formulate a conclusion and facilitate actionable intelligence. In the Spiritual Intelligence Mentorship, also known as SIM, we will teach you to interpret dreams by hearing the voice of God directly, including dreams from and about U.S. presidents. As part of SIM, you will have a role in decoding divine messages used to advise world leaders and impact current events. There is a place for you in SIM. Join us today at spiritualintel.com.